Determine the limit of f of x equals 2x minus 3 as the values of x approach 1. So we are interested in the behavior of this function 2x minus 3 as the value of x, which is this guy right here, gets closer and closer to 1. For us to be able to do that, let's first illustrate the idea of limits. We're going to need a number line for that. Go tayo dito. Of course, in a number line, we have a line with arrowheads indicating that this line goes on forever. And within the number line, or on the number line, we have 0, the set of all positive numbers, which is found to the right of 0. Same way, we also have the set of all negative numbers found to the left of 0. And again, it says here that we want to determine the limit of this function 2x minus 3 as the values of x gets closer and closer to 1, or as the values of x approach 1. And 1 on our number line is found right here. So ang gusto raw malaman, ano kaya ang limit nito kung function na to habang si x, lahat ng values ng x natin ay lumalapit ng lumalapit dito sa 1. Not exactly 1, but it gets closer and closer to 1. Notice na dalawa yung ginawa kong arrows. Kasi kung lalapit ka kay 1, you can do that from the left side, kung saan galing yung mga negative numbers. In the same way, pwede mo rin gawin yon from the right side. Which means, for us to determine the limit of this function, we need to look at both sides. To visualize that further, let's use a table. Yan, dalawa yung table natin because again, gusto natin tingnan sa magkabilang side ni positive 1. From the left side, itong isang table natin ay from the left side of 1. Positive 1. And then, itong isa naman, from the right side of 1. And we have all of the values of x na tayo ang maglalagay. And then, yung magiging itsura ng f of x, ng function natin, kung yun yung values ng x, with the corresponding values of x. Tingnan ulit natin yung number line, mabilis lang. So, ang gusto nating malaman, i-approach si 1 mula sa left, tsaka mula sa right. If you approach positive 1 from the left side, marami kang pagpipilian. In fact, infinite yan since this line goes on forever. But then, you're only interested to the value of f of x, the limit of f of x, as x approaches 1. So, kung yun din lang naman ang goal mo, then maybe you can start near 1. Pwede naman dito, pwede dito, kaya lang para hindi tayo mahirapan, lapitan na natin. Let's start 1 unit away from 1, which is 0. Siya ang isang unit mula kay 1 from the left side. Again, pwedeng negative 1, pwedeng negative 2, can be negative 3, can be any number from the left side of 1. But then, gusto lang naman kasi natin lapitan si 1. So, why not? Let's just start evaluating the limit from the closest unit, which is 0, sa left side. Balikan natin yung table. Ano kaya daw ang mangyayari kay f of x kung ang x natin is 0? Basically, what we need to do now is to plug in all of the values of x na may isip natin na ilalagay natin dito doon sa x ng function, which is 2x minus 3. If x is 0, then f of x will be 0 times 2 is 0, minus 3 will be negative 3. Ibig sabihin kung ang x daw ay 0, si f of x magiging negative 3. Isang unit yon away from 1. Medyo lapit pa tayo. Goal natin is to approach 1. Lapitan pa natin ng onte. Let's say 0.5. Halfway na tayo ha. Halfway na. Ano kaya magiging value ni f of x if x is 0.5? Now, since we will be dealing with decimals dito sa mga susunod na part, it would be more convenient for us to use a calculator. So if you have a calculator with you, pakilabas na yan, sabayan mo kung mag-compute. I have mine here. So ano daw magiging value ni f of x, which is 2x minus 3 if x is 0.5? Tingnan natin. So we have to multiply 2 by 0.5 and then subtract natin si 3. That's negative 2. Ibig sabihin kung 0.5 daw ang value ni x, itong buong function natin magiging negative 2. Paano naman kaya? Lapitan pa natin. Gawin natin 0.75. Lagyan natin ng 0 para hindi tayo malito. Mas malapit na tayo kay 1. Kanina 0 and then naging 0.5 and then naging 0.75. Mas malapit na kay 1. Ano kaya magiging value ng function natin? So let's plug in. We have to multiply 2 by 0.75 and then subtract 3. Naging negative 3 halves. I'd like to convert it to decimal para mas maganda siyang tingnan. Naging negative 1.5. Lapitan pa natin. Gawin nating 0.8 ang value ni x. Ano kaya ang magiging itsura ni function? Same thing, multiply 2 by 0.8, which is the value of x. Subtract natin si 3. Then we will have negative 1.4. You need to observe the values. The f of x, ha? As the values of x gets closer and closer to positive 1, ano kaya mangyayari dito? Lapitan pa natin. How about if x is 0.9? So, multiply natin si 2 by 0.9. Then, subtract natin si 3. Naging negative 1.2. Lapitan ko pa. Malapit na ako sa 1. 0.1 na lang. 1 na ako. But then, I don't want x to be 1. I just want it to approach 1. That's the keyword. Gusto ko lang lapitan si 1. Ayaw kong maging 1. So, gawin ko tong 0.99. And sobrang lapit ko na sa 1. Ano kaya magiging value ng function natin? So, 2 times 0.99 minus 3 will give us negative 1.02. Lapit pa tayo. Hindi pa ako kontento dyan. Although medyo may napapansin na kayong pattern, maybe, dagdagan pa natin. Sayang naman yung column. 0.999. Try natin. Subtract 3. We will have negative 1.002. So that's what happens to the function 2x minus 3 if x gets closer and closer to 1. Mula ito sa left side ni positive 1. You have to understand na mula sa left tayo nang galing. So habang lumalapit daw tayo kay 1 sa left side niya, ang nagiging value ng function, what can you observe? From negative 3, naging negative 2, naging negative 1.5, negative 1.4, negative 1.2, and then negative 1.02, negative 1.002. You can keep on going. Kung wala ka pang makita ang pattern dyan, you can keep on going. Dagdagan mo pa to, pero wag kang magiging 1. Just approach 1. So maybe you can add another 9.9999 and then plug in mo again dito. But I think this is enough for us to observe that as we approach 1 from the left side, itong function natin nagiging -1. Malapit siya sa -1. Now, try natin kung anong mangyayari naman kung lalapitan natin si 1 mula sa right side. Dito naman tayo manggagaling. Which means we can use as the value of x any number right here. So magmula dito, hindi 1 na ayaw nating maging 1, pero siguro dito hanggang paganoon. Infinite again ang set ng iyong options. But then since we only want to observe the behavior of the function as we get closer to 1, start na tayo 1 unit away from 1. Dito naman sa right side niya, which is positive 2. Try natin. If x is positive 2, ano kayang magiging value ng function? Balik natin yung calculate natin. Ilipat lang natin siya saglit. So we have 2 multiplied by 2 minus 3. Basic na basic. Merong 1. Ibig sabihin the value of the function as x approaches 1 from the right side, or as x is equal to 2, magiging 1 daw siya. Medyo lapitan ko pa. Halfway ulit. Gawin nating positive 1.5. Nandito na ako. Try natin. Bringing back our calculator, we have 1.5 multiplied by 2, and then subtract natin si 3. Again, what I'm doing is simply plugging in the values of x. Na ako rin naman ang nag-isip. Tayo rin ang nag-decide. You can do that on your own. And then, evaluating it. So, sabi dito, if x is equal to 1.5, 1.5 times 2 is 3 minus 3 will be 0. Lapitan pa natin si positive 1. Gawin natin 1.25. Plugging in, we have 1.25 multiplied by 2 minus 3. That will be -1/2, or in decimal is simply -0. Ayusin natin yung pagkakasulat. 0.5. If x is equal to 1.25. Kaso medyo malayo pa yan sa 1 eh. Dagdagan pa natin. Lapit pa tayo konti. You can think of any number, pero gawin nating 1.2. Mas malapit na to kay 1 kumpara dito. Ano kaya magiging value ng function natin? 1.2 multiplied by 2 less 3 is negative. Oops, I think there's something wrong. Ulitin natin. 1.2 multiplied by 2 minus 3 will be negative 0.6. Ilagay ka na yung 0 para hindi tayo malito. 0.6. Lapit pa tayo. Pwede pa. Gawin nating 1.1 ang value ni x. What do you think will be the value of this function if x is equal to 1.1? Let's plug in. 1.1 multiplied by 2 minus 3. In decimal will be negative 0.8. So 1, 0, negative 0.5, naging 0.6, negative 0.8. Lapit pa tayo konti. Let's try 1.01. Hindi pa siya 1, but closer to 1 than this. So ano kaya magiging value ng function natin? 1.01 multiplied by 2 minus 3 is simply negative 0.98. May isa pang column. Huwag natin sayangin. How about if x is equal to 1.001? Again, this is so close to 1, pero hindi pa siya 1. That's what we want. To approach 1, not become like 1. Ano ay magiging value ng function natin? Try ulit natin. So we have 1.001 multiplied by 2 minus 3. That's negative 0.998. Now, from the left side of 1, as we approach positive 1, pansinin na nagawa nating lumapit ng lumapit sa negative 1. Nagawa nating lumapit ng lumapit sa negative 1. Dito naman sa right side ni positive 1, habang yung values ng x natin ay lumalapit ng lumalapit sa kanya, sa positive 1, ano nangyayari sa function natin? Tingnan natin, mula kay 1, naging 0, naging negative 0.5, naging negative 0.6, negative 0.8, negative 0.98, negative 0.998, and we could keep on going. Pero I think the pattern is obviously negative 1 as well. So if we get closer and closer to positive 1 from the left side, naging negative 1 yung value ng function. Nilapitan natin siya mula sa right side, naging negative 1 din ang value ng function. We can therefore say that the limit of f of x, which is in this case 2x minus 3, as x approaches positive 1 is negative 1. Bakit natin kinunclude yan? Bakit natin sinabi na yung limit daw ng function natin habang yung values ng x natin ay lumalapit sa 1 is negative 1. Bakit natin nasabi yun? Simply because after approaching positive 1 from the left and right side, meaning on both sides, parehas yung nakuha nating value, which is negative 1. That is the only time that a limit of a function exists. If the limits from both sides, from the left and from the right, are essentially the same. So in symbol, we can write that as let's create a new page. The limit of our function, which is in this case 2x minus 3, as the values of x approach positive 1, is negative 1, according to what we found out earlier. This is how you write this in symbol. The limit of f of x, which is in this case, in this example's case, is 2x minus 3, as x approaches positive 1 is equal to negative 1. To generalize our ideas earlier, a limit of a function or let's just say the limit of a function, let's say f of x, exists if we have some conditions to consider. Number 1 is to check for the limit if you approach x from the first side, which is the left side. So pwede natin sabihin yun as compute for the limit of f of x as x approaches the left side of a certain number. Let's call it a. And para ma-distinguish natin yung left sa right, lagyan natin ang negative sign, ang minus sign dun sa parang exponent niya. Compute for the limit of the function as x approaches the left side of a, which is in this example's case yung 1. Let's call it a. Arbitrary lang si a. This can be any letter. In the same way, gawin mo rin yun sa right side. So, dapat compute mo rin yung limit of the given function as the values of x approach the right side of a this time. So, tingnan kung merong limit sa left. Tingnan kung meron sa right. Kagaya ng ginawa natin, may na-approach silang value respectively. And then, the last thing to do is to check and see if the limit of f of x as x approaches the left of a is equal to the limit of f of x as x approaches the right of a. So, hindi lang dapat may limit sa left, hindi lang dapat may limit sa right, dapat parehas sila ng value. For us to be able to say that a certain limit exists, kagaya niyan. Gawin nating mas generalizing symbol natin. So, the limit of a function as x approaches a certain number, let's call it a, exists if the limits from the left side and the right side are the same. That's how we say that a limit exists. Now, there are certain cases that the limits from the left side and the right side are not the same. Mangyayari yun. If that happens, lagyan natin ng counting footnote. If the limit as x approaches the left side is not the same as the limit of f of x as x approaches the right side of a, then the limit does not exist. Or, para mas madali siyang isulat, lagay natin DNE. DNE or the limit does not exist kung hindi parehas yung nakuha mong value nung nilapitan mo yung a sa left side at nung nilapitan mo siya sa right side. So that will be all for our introduction to limits video. Thank you so much for watching.